Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. The night that vicious attacker tried forcing his way into my home on Halloween is permanently etched in my mind. It was without question the most harrowing experience of my life. I'll never forget the icy terror I felt facing down that knife-wielding psychopath. Now I take every possible precaution to prevent being caught off guard like that again. I had excitedly prepared for Halloween earlier that evening, filling an enormous engraved glass bowl with all varieties of candy bars to give out. I set it on an antique table placed precisely next to my front door, within easy reach. The first hour passed pleasantly. Adorable children dressed as princesses, pirates, and superheroes came up my walkway in giggling groups to show off their costumes and claim their treats. I complimented each creative outfit as I dropped candy into their festive pumpkin buckets. One zombie with tattered clothes and incredibly realistic makeup effects told me proudly about the hours it took creating his gory look. It was all lighthearted Halloween fun. As the night wore on, the costumes shifted to a darker and more twisted vibe. Around 9 p.m., a kid approached my house utterly drenched from head to toe in shockingly realistic blood and gore. His clothes were shredded to ribbons, limbs jutting out at unnatural angles, fake limp intestines dragging across my tidy walkway. When I questioned the elaborate effects, he stood there motionless, staring at me with a chilling blank expression. Unnerved by his silence, I quietly placed some candy in his bag, forcing a smile. Things got even more unsettling as more kids arrived covered in gruesome wounds that seemed freakishly real. One girl's entire neck was sliced wide open, blood pouring steadily down her shirt. A boy had half his face ripped clean off, exposing bloody muscle and bone beneath. I had easily asked about their costumes, but they just stood there soundless, their vacant eyes penetrating me with uncanny dread. This had to be movie studio level special effects, right? I was down to less than a handful of candy bars when a powerfully built person dressed all in black with a grotesque pumpkin mask approached my door. In his muscular arms he cradled the largest, sharpest butcher knife I've ever laid eyes on. Laughing anxiously, I complimented the alarming realism of his weapon, praying it was just a rubber prop. Without a word, he slowly raised the glinting knife toward me as I reluctantly dropped one of my last candies into his bag. Palpable relief washed over me as this unsettling interaction came to an end. I began gently closing the heavy wooden door. In a flash, the sinister figure rammed his thick boot over the threshold, violently lodging it in the doorway. My heart hammered against my chest as I threw my full body weight against the door, pleading with him to leave. He pressed forward with frightening force and raised a massive knife, pointing it mere inches from my face. I opened my mouth to scream for help, but my voice was muted by delighted shrieks of children on the street, oblivious to the horror unfolding. It was just this monster and me, locked in a life or death struggle in the doorway. We grappled savagely, me pushing back in primal terror against his sturdy boot. His colossal strength gradually overpowered me as the razor-sharp tip of the knife pierced the wooden door, slicing toward my face. In that paralyzing moment, I truly believed I was staring death in the face at the hands of this ruthless intruder. This was no playful Halloween stunt. The twist of the knife, the raw power in his frame, this was a monstrous assault. But just as suddenly as it started, he stopped pushing, jerked his foot back, and sprinted off into the night. I slammed the door with all my might, chest heaving, hands trembling violently. My mind raced. Who was that masked devil? Would he return to finish me off? Should I call the police? What if that knife had made contact with my throat instead of the door? Too overcome by shock to think coherently, I collapsed to the floor in a heap of tears. Maybe I seem paranoid now, but I'll never forget the sinister, malevolent energy that invaded my reality that night in the form of alarmingly realistic costumes and an intruder possessed by violence. Pure evil came to my doorstep with dark intents I dare not imagine. In the months since then, I've installed security cameras, reinforced doors, motion sensor lights, and an advanced alarm system. I keep pepper spray and a panic button on me everywhere I go. I know the chances are slim it will happen again, but I refuse to let my guard down. I've warned all my neighbors to be vigilant for sadistic Halloween attacks. They dismissed me as crazy, claimed it was just reckless teenagers pulling pranks, but they didn't experience the wicked threat I faced. Perhaps someday I'll be able to look back on that night and laugh. But for now, remembering the all-consuming terror I endured only hardens my resolve to defend myself. I cannot be certain those were just harmless costumes and props, but the fear was devastatingly real, and I vow to be ready if that evil returns. I won't surrender helplessly to violence from intruders, especially not on Halloween. This year, any predator at my door will face an empowered warrior, not a weak victim. Never again will I ignore the darkness that hunts among us. The memory of that fateful Halloween night will be forever burned into my mind. No matter how many years go by, I don't think I'll ever be able to erase the bone-chilling fear I felt or stop kicking myself for being so unbelievably stupid. I was young and stupid, and all I cared about was indulging my massive sweet tooth. For weeks leading up to Halloween, Jenny and I had spent hours planning our epic costumes. I was going as a black cat, putting together a complete head-to-toe black outfit. I painted my face with black whiskers, a pink nose, and extended my eyeliner into a cat eye shape. I pinned a long black tail to the back of my skirt and styled my hair into cat ears. Jenny was going as a zombie bride. She had ordered a light blue bridesmaid dress online and artfully shredded and stained it to look decayed. She teased her blonde hair wildly and wove in twigs and leaves. Her makeup was unbelievable. One contact lens made bloodshot, dark circles under her eyes, fake blood dripping from her lips. She had even made a bouquet of dead, dried-up flowers. We were both so proud of our costumes and couldn't wait to show them off. Finally, Halloween night arrived. As soon as it started getting dark outside, we suited up in our costumes. We headed out to the neighborhood, empty pillowcases in hand, ready to haul home as much candy as humanly possible. Our first few stops were houses close to ours that we knew well. Parents exclaimed over our costumes, saying we were the most creative trick-or-treaters they'd seen. We posed and gave each other high fives, thrilled with the compliments. My bulky cattail kept sagging down, so I had to periodically stop to repin it. Jenny's thick zombie makeup was already getting itchy, but we were having too much fun to care about our costume malfunctions. After hitting all the familiar houses in our neighborhood, our bags were satisfyingly heavy, but I wasn't ready to call it a night yet. I convinced Jenny we should head over to Driftwood Road on the outskirts of town. I heard they gave out the best candy, even full chocolate bars. She wanted to stay closer to home, but I begged, telling her we had to go for the top-tier treats. Reluctantly, she agreed, as long as it was our last stop before heading home. We walked a mile to Driftwood Road as more kids were starting to head home for the night. By the time we got there, it was practically deserted. All the houses were massive and decrepit, with elaborately creepy Halloween displays sprawling across their yards. Giant blow-up ghosts and zombies, huge fake spider webs strewn with enormous plastic spiders, tombstones popping up out of the ground, smoke machines making fog swirl eerily around our feet. It was awesome, but also started to give me chills. Jenny walked so close behind me, she kept stepping in the back of my shoes. Clearly, she was already regretting agreeing to come here. I was still dead set on scoring the best candy in town. We walked down the deserted street, admiring all the decorations. At each door, I made Jenny pose with me while I rang the bell. People dropped handfuls of name-brand candy bars into our bags, hooting and awing over our handmade costumes. My bag was getting satisfyingly heavy as we neared the end of the street. The last house was set far back on the lot, practically hidden by trees. It was run down with peeling paint and overgrown landscaping, but giant carved pumpkins lined the walkway and smoke swirled creepily around it. I marched right up to the door, ignoring Jenny's pleas to just head home already. This was our chance at the ultimate Halloween haul. A man dressed as Dracula opened the door, holding a candy bowl. In the dim light, his face was cast in shadows by his cape. In an Eastern European accent, he exclaimed, "Ah, look, a little black kitty has come to my door." He looked me up and down in a way that should have grossed me out. I have something extra special for cute little kitties who come inside. He gestured for me to come in as he told Jenny to wait on the sidewalk. Any normal child would have instantly seen the blazing red warning signs, but I was drunk on sugar visions, imagining piles of full-size candy bars waiting inside. I blindly followed Dracula into the house, leaving Jenny shouting anxiously behind me. Inside was dimly lit and crammed floor to ceiling with dusty old Halloween props and decorations. It smelled like moldy leaves and candles that had burned for too long. I followed Dracula's sweeping cape through the narrow halls, watching it knock into creepy life-sized figures that seemed to turn and look at me as I passed them. He led me to the kitchen, telling me my treat was waiting in there. In my candy-crazed state, I didn't realize I was walking straight into a trap. The second we entered the kitchen, Dracula abruptly slammed the door shut behind us and locked it. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm so tightly I yelped in pain. His spooky accent disappeared, replaced with a guttural growl as he told me I looked sweet enough to eat. The gravity of the perilous situation crashed over me. I screamed and desperately tried yanking my arm free, but his grip was too strong. Horror flooded my body when I realized I was locked alone in this creepy house with a psycho stranger. I shrieked and pleaded for help at the top of my lungs, but Dracula just laughed deeply and said no one but him could hear me. Tears streamed down my face as I continued fighting with all my might to break free of this monster. I heard Jenny's voice calling my name from outside and frantically pounding on the front door. Her desperate cries only enraged Dracula more. With his fingernails digging painfully into my arm, he dragged me toward a pitch-black hallway as I resisted with all my strength. Mere seconds before he pulled me into the hall, the front door suddenly crashed open. Jenny had gotten help. Police stormed in with guns aimed directly at Dracula. He instantly let me go and I sprang free, running and sobbing into the officer's arms. They tackled Dracula to the ground, cuffing him as he screamed obscenities at them. Jenny rushed to hug me tighter than she ever had before. I was too in shock to process everything as the police took our statements. All I could do was cry with relief and gratitude that I was alive. Jenny had realized something was horribly wrong and called 911. If she hadn't come to my rescue, I don't want to imagine what sadistic terrors would have awaited me in that hallway. Halloween had always been my absolute favorite holiday, but one year it took a truly scary and threatening turn right at my own front door. I was home alone getting ready to pass out candy when someone began insistently knocking, but no costumed kids were there when I answered, just empty air. At first I thought it was just some early neighborhood pranksters doing ding-dong ditch mischief, but the phantom knocking continued relentlessly all night long, even after I turned off my porch light to signal I was done. Things escalated from unnerving to seriously frightening when a lit firecracker was cruelly shoved into my mailbox, blasting it to pieces and confirming I was indeed being actively targeted by one or more malicious individuals for terrorization. I ended up calling the police because it became clear this went far beyond harmless holiday tricks. After that traumatic experience of being menaced so violatingly, I struggled for years to ever fully enjoy or feel safe during Halloween again, badly shaken by the harsh realization that a night of spooky fun could so easily turn sinister. October 31st had arrived, and I was truly looking forward to and reveling in my very first Halloween, getting to play host in my new house. I had spent the whole week prior decorating excitedly, carving clever jack-o'-lanterns for the porch, putting up cobwebs and skeletons, stocking up on mountains of candy for the swarms of adorable costume trick-or-treaters I just knew would come. My decorations were fantastic, if I did say so myself. I loved imagining all the little kids who would get such joy from it all, and being the one to welcome them for the big night. As the evening fell on Halloween, I turned on my festive porch light decorations and spooky ambient music, waiting eagerly in the doorway with a huge bowl brimming with various sweets I knew would be big hits. Around 7 p.m. came the very first knock at my front door. I sprang up, ready to fawn over the kids' costumes. But when I swung open the door, no one was there. Just a dark, empty porch and the street looking deserted except for a few packs of trick-or-treaters traipsing by in the distance. Strange, I thought to myself. I initially brushed it off as some first early ding-dong titched by roguish kids amped up on sugar wanting to pull pranks. I left the candy bowl on a table by the door and went back inside. But then came another sudden forceful knocking, this time louder and more aggressive. Apprehensively, I crept over to peek out, half expecting to catch a hapless troublemaker red-handed. But again, not a single soul was actually on the porch, just my Halloween decorations blowing around slightly in the evening wind. A small chill ran through me unexpectedly, but I tried to laugh it off and shake away the unease. Kids will be kids out for mischief on Halloween, I rationalized. However, the mysterious disembodied knocking continued unexpectedly all evening long, every few minutes like clockwork. Sometimes it was just a faint sporadic tap on the door that I could barely hear over the blaring TV. Other times it was a loud, insistent pounding that made me jump in fright from the other room. But every single time I reluctantly slunk over to check who was at the door, I would find my front porch invariably empty and not a figure in sight. Yet the enigmatic knocking would inevitably resume again the minute I let my guard down and sat back down on the couch. By 10 p.m. I had entirely given up hope of any more adorable real trick-or-treaters actually coming by for candy. I reluctantly turned off my festive porch light decorations, signaling I was done for the night, hoping that would also deter the mysterious knocker from continuing their relentless assault on my door. But even with the lights off, the disembodied knocking persisted unrelentingly, seeming to grow only more forceful and demanding, practically rattling the door right on its hinges. I peered out through the curtains into the darkness, feeling the first real traces of true fear creeping up my spine. Who was so stubbornly determined to terrify me at my own home on Halloween, and why target me? The frightening answer came just minutes later when a sudden deafening explosion abruptly went off right outside. I dove to the floor on instinct, heart palpitating wildly in sheer panic. After a minute of ominous silence, I finally worked up the courage to crawl over and peer out the window again. My metal mailbox stood visibly mangled and was actually smoking faintly, pieces scattered across the yard. Someone had purposefully shoved a lit firecracker inside the confined space, violently blasting the box off its stand entirely and into pieces. It was in that minute I realized without a doubt that this was very real, and someone was intentionally and maliciously escalating their attacks on me, going far beyond teenage shenanigans. Cold fear washed through me, knowing I was not safe here alone on what should have been a fun holiday. Whoever was terrorizing me clearly had no limits. Hands shaking, I called 911, insisting in a trembling voice that I needed help immediately before things became even more dangerous or violent. The operator said a patrol car would sweep by within a few minutes, but I should try to get out of the vulnerable house and somewhere safer with people in the meantime, if at all possible. So I sat up anxiously waiting for the police to arrive, nearly jumping out of my skin as every creak and shadow now seemed ominous. The faceless threats I had tried dismissing now felt very real and close, just on the other side of my flimsy walls and doors that could never possibly keep true evil at bay. When the squad car finally rolled up 15 agonizing minutes later, the officers inspected my demolished mailbox and the surrounding block, but reported no one outwardly suspicious appeared to still be lurking in the immediate area. After taking my statement and documenting the escalating incidents, they strongly suggested I spend the night elsewhere just to be safe, and promised to increase patrols in the neighborhood over the next few weeks. Feeling utterly terrified to be alone inside the once cozy house that now teemed with unseen menace, I hastily packed a bag and drove to stay at a friend's place for the night, still jittery with adrenaline and glancing over my shoulder compulsively. Of course, I had always loved Halloween, but now I truly understood firsthand that real-life horrors did not stop just because it was a holiday.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.